everyone, I'm Elizabeth from Simple Simon and Company, and today in this video we're going to go over all things foundational paper piecing. We are going to start out with our brand new pattern. This is our Shine Bright quilt block that is darling and so fun in lots of different fabrics. Let's go over our supplies really quickly and then we'll get started. The first thing that you're going to need to do is go over to our shop and purchase and download the pattern for the quilt block. It's set into two pieces, which I'll show you all about this. It's going to be really easy for you, and it only costs $1. So go over there, you're going to need to download it, and then print out as many blocks as you're going to need. The quilt that I made, that you'll see pictures of in this post, needs 16, so I printed out 16 pieces of our pattern. The other things that you're going to need, which I have down on my board, so they're a little harder to see, are a quilting ruler, a quilting cutter, and then you're going to need your fabrics. Today we're going to be working with those solids again, so I've done a darker pink, a light pink, and then white for the background, so it'll be exactly like the block that I showed you. You'll also need your sewing machine. You'll need an iron close by. I'm going to take my pattern that I've already downloaded, one of them right here, and I'm going to cut it down the middle. All right, I've got my two halves. You can kind of see, I'm going to hold this one closer. This is going to be the top of our diamond. It has 10 pieces to it, and then this is going to be the bottom, and it has 6. So 1, 3, 5, and 7 are going to be my darker fabrics. 2, 4, and 6 are going to be my lighter, but you can change that up. The very first thing that I'm going to need to do is take 1 square of darker fabric and 1 square of lighter fabric. And if you remember in that video that I did on Facebook Live, you can go back and watch that one. I did a Facebook Live on paper piecing, that we're actually putting the fabrics on the back of our paper. So we'll be sewing on the front and our fabrics go on the back. I'm going to layer my fabric number 1 over number 1, and then I'm going to layer fabric for my square number 2 right on top of that. Then I'm going to take this over to the machine and I'm going to sew down that line. So let me get set up at the machine and I'll meet you right back here so you can see exactly what I'm doing. On your machine at home, there's one thing that we all need to do, which is decrease our stitch length. Right now mine is sitting at a 2.5 and I'm going to decrease that down. I like a 1.6. Some people prefer a 1.8. Somewhere between 1.6 and 1.8 is great. And what that's going to do is perforate the paper, take tinier stitches so that when it's time to rip the paper off the back, it comes off much easier. So I've got my template and my 2 fabrics that are all ready to go. One thing that I failed to mention is I just am using fabric scrap, so there's no rhyme or reason. You just need your fabric bigger than the area that you're going to cover up. And you need to remember that you need to leave some seam allowances all the way around. I just kind of overlap the seam right there because this is the seam we're going to be sewing on between 1 and 2. And then I'm going to turn that over. You can kind of see that both of my fabrics are covering up that area. So I'm going to sew right along this line. One thing that I like to do when I'm paper piecing is I like to start 1 stitch before the line and I like to end 1 or 2 stitches after the line. So here we go. Okay, you can see that I've just sewn 1 stitch and then I've gone 2 stitches beyond. This is actually going to be in our seam allowance, so that will be great. And then the next thing that I need to do is open this up. So I just fold back right along that line where I've stitched. And then I need to trim my seam allowances. And all I'm going to do is trim this off so that it's 1/4 inch. Okay, so you can see I've just taken it over to my ironing mat that's right next to me and I've pressed this seam flat. One thing that you'll need to remember is to use a dry iron, no steam on this because it will kind of wrinkle and crinkle up the paper as it goes. Okay, you can kind of see where we're going next. We've got our first triangle right here, which is our dark fabric, our second triangle, and then we're actually going to put our paper over our third triangle. Make our seam allowance because if you'll remember, this is going to fold over and create that third triangle. All right, I've got my third piece on and then I'm just going to continue with 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the pink parts. And then I'm going to do the top white, which is number 8, and then 9 and 10, which are going to be my side pieces. So I have one of those already done, and it's going to look like this when you're finished. I'll show you this side as well. So I've gone ahead and sewn all of them. You can see where I've kind of sewn over the top there to hold in those seam allowances. And then the back of it has all these extra pieces, but yours is going to look something like this. So I've got that part done, and then we're going to move on to the bottom part, which is going to be the exact same process. I'm going to start with number 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I'll do white for 5 and white for 6. You can see where I had to unpick. I didn't have quite enough white right there, which might happen to you. So again, think bigger. And then this is what it's going to look like on the other side when it is already done. I will point out something. See how I've just had enough to cover that one seam right there? It's gonna be okay. I would prefer it to have a lot more like these at the top, but because it's covering that line just a little bit, which I'm actually gonna sew on that line, I'll just be really careful to make sure that I catch that in. And I'm just gonna line up with my 1/4 inch right here, and then I'm just gonna trim off all 4 sides of this. I've got my top trimmed, my bottom trimmed, and I did a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. So what I like to do is match up my 2 white parts right there. I can see exactly where they're going to go. So even if I'm a little off on the end, it's not going to matter because those are going to be in seam allowances, but I really want these 2 places to match up when I look at my finished quilt block. All right, so you can see where I've sewn that seam, and then I've just taken it over to my ironing board and I've pressed it going up, and then we'll turn it over and see how well I did. Not so bad. I'm right. Oh, this one's a little worse. I could pull that out and move it over a little tiny bit, but hey, when you're back there, it's looking great. So let me show you a couple of the other ones. This one's gonna be kind of a jewel tone quilt. So here's my other pink that I've got going. And then I've got blue, I've got orange and peach, I've got a green, and I've got a yellow. And I've done 2 of each of those. And then all I'm gonna do when I'm ready to put my quilt together, because these already have my 1/4 inch seam allowances, is sew down this flat 1/4 inch seam allowance line until you've got your whole quilt pieced. After that, what you're going to do is you're going to rip off all of the papers that go on the back, and you've got your quilt top done. Here's a picture of the quilt that I made out of our Shine Bright collection by Riley Blake Designs. You can find this and a lot of other quilting tutorials at www.simplesimonandco.com.